The dining hall was filled with the soft clinking of expensive cutlery and quiet laughter from people who had never worried about a single meal in their lives, until a sudden silence fell like a heavy curtain. A trembling waitress stood frozen, her tray shaking in her hands, while a powerful man in a tailored suit leaned back in his chair, smirking as if her dignity was something he could purchase and destroy at will. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, an old war veteran slowly stood up from a corner table, his chair scraping the floor, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the entire room. Enough! That single word changed everything. The restaurant was one of the most luxurious in the city, located inside a glass-walled tower that overlooked a peaceful boulevard where golden sunlight poured in like a soft blessing. Inside, everything sparkled, chandeliers reflecting warm light, polished marble floors, and tables filled with people who spoke in quiet tones about stocks, business deals, and luxury vacations. Among them was a young waitress named Alina, moving carefully between tables with a gentle smile that hid how exhausted she really was. She wasn't just working for tips. She was working to survive, to support her younger brother's education, and to keep the small remaining pieces of her world from falling apart. Alina had always been known for her patience. No matter how rude a customer was, she bowed her head politely and kept going. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the air itself felt heavier, like something was waiting to happen. At the center table sat Victor Hale, a wealthy businessman known not only for his fortune but also for his arrogance. He was surrounded by colleagues who laughed at his jokes too quickly, as if afraid of being on the wrong side of his temper. When Alina approached to serve his order, she accidentally placed a glass a little too close to his paperwork. It was a harmless mistake, something that would normally be ignored. But Victor didn't ignore it. He stared at the glass, then slowly at her. "Do you know how much this suit costs?" he asked, his voice loud enough to draw attention. Alina blinked, confused. "Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "You didn't mean what? To touch something above your level?" He interrupted sharply, leaning back with a cold smile. "People like you should be more careful. One mistake, and you ruin things you can't even afford to look at." A few people chuckled awkwardly, pretending not to hear. Alina felt her cheeks burn, but she lowered her head. "I apologize, sir." But Victor wasn't finished. He picked up a napkin and slowly wiped the table, exaggerating the motion as if she had contaminated it. "You know," he continued loudly, "this is why some people stay where they belong. Not everyone is meant to be in places like this." The room grew quieter. A few customers looked uncomfortable, but no one intervened. Alina's hands tightened around her tray. She wanted to disappear, but she needed this job. "I said I'm sorry," she repeated softly. Victor leaned forward. "Sorry doesn't fix stupidity." That's when something shifted in the room. From the far corner, a man stood up. He wasn't dressed like the others. His clothes were simple, his jacket worn at the edges, his face marked with the quiet weight of someone who had seen too much of life. His name was Daniel Mercer, a former military veteran who had served overseas and now lived a quiet, humble life working odd jobs and keeping to himself. He walked slowly toward the table. Each step was calm, but firm. People turned to look at him, confused. Victor raised an eyebrow as Daniel stopped beside Alina. "Is there a problem?" Victor asked sarcastically. Daniel didn't look at him at first. Instead, he looked at Alina, really looked at her. Not as a waitress. Not as someone beneath anyone. Just a human being trying to hold herself together. Then he spoke. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "There is." Victor let out a small laugh. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" Daniel finally turned his gaze toward him. "Someone who understands the difference between confidence and cruelty." The table went silent. Victor stood up slowly, clearly irritated. "You think you can lecture me?" "I'm not lecturing you," Daniel replied. "I'm warning you." Attention spread across the room so quickly it felt physical. Alina stepped back slightly, unsure what was happening. For the first time, someone had actually stood up for her. But she didn't know if it would make things better or worse. Victor scoffed. People like you don't belong in conversations like this. Daniel's expression didn't change. And people like you forget too easily what respect means when no one stops them. The words hit harder than expected. Victor took a step forward. Do you even know who I am? Daniel nodded slightly. Yes, that's the problem. The silence that followed was thick enough to suffocate the room. Security staff began to notice the tension, slowly approaching from the sides, unsure whether to intervene. Alina's heart raced. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want anyone getting hurt because of her. But something unexpected happened next. Daniel gently placed his hand up. Not threatening, not aggressive, just enough to signal calm. It's okay, he said softly to Alina. You don't deserve this. Something in his voice made her freeze. It wasn't just kindness. It was understanding, deep personal understanding, like he had once stood exactly where she was standing now. Victor laughed again, but it was forced now. You're defending a waitress? Really? Daniel looked at him again. I'm defending a person. That simple sentence changed the atmosphere entirely. But what no one knew yet, what not a single person in that room could have guessed, was that Alina's life was far more complicated than anyone realized. And this moment, this confrontation, was about to unravel a truth that would silence even the loudest arrogance in the room. Because Alina wasn't just a waitress struggling to survive, and Daniel wasn't just a man stepping in out of kindness. Something far bigger was about to be revealed. The tension in the restaurant lingered like a storm that refused to break. Victor's face had turned rigid now, his confidence shaken but not yet destroyed. Daniel still stood between him and Alina, steady as if he had no intention of moving no matter what pressure came his way. Security personnel finally stepped closer, but Daniel raised a hand again. Not aggressively, just calmly. No need for force, he said. This doesn't need to become something ugly. Victor scoffed. Ugly? You think this is ugly? I call it discipline. People like her need to learn their place. Alina flinched slightly at the words. Daniel noticed, and something in him hardened. Not with anger, but with resolve. You don't get to decide her place, Daniel said quietly. Victor's patience snapped. You're nobody, a forgotten soldier playing hero in a world that moved on without you. The words were meant to hurt, but Daniel didn't react the way Victor expected. Instead, he slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He didn't open it yet. He just held it in his hand. I've spent enough time in places where people talk like you do, Daniel said. The difference is, out there, words like that don't last long. Victor smirked. Is that supposed to scare me? Before Daniel could answer, something unexpected happened. Alina stepped forward. Her voice was soft but steady. Please, stop. Both men turned toward her. For a moment, she looked smaller than ever, but her eyes held something new. Something neither anger nor fear, but quiet truth. I don't want trouble, she said. I just want to work. Victor waved dismissively. Then tell your little protector to step aside. But Daniel didn't move. Instead, he looked at Alina again, and this time his expression changed slightly, like recognition mixed with concern. You don't remember me, do you? He asked her gently. Alina frowned slightly. What? A faint silence spread. Victor laughed. Oh, now what is this? A dramatic twist. Daniel ignored him completely. He took a slow breath. 3 years ago, he said, there was a fire in the East District, an orphan support home. You were there. Alina froze. The restaurant didn't make a sound anymore. Daniel continued. You were helping children get out. You stayed inside longer than you should have. Alina's grip tightened on her tray. Her face went pale, like a memory she had buried deep had just been pulled into the light. Victor frowned. What is this nonsense? But Daniel kept speaking. I was part of the rescue team that night, he said. I carried out the last group. And I remember you because you went back inside for one more child when everyone else had already escaped. Alina's eyes trembled slightly. I don't. You saved her, Daniel said firmly. And you almost didn't make it out yourself. The silence that followed was different now. Heavier. Real. Victor looked between them, confused and irritated. Why are you telling me this? Daniel finally opened the document in his hand and placed it on the table. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anything dangerous. It was an award recognition letter and identification record. And next to Alina's name was a title no one in the restaurant expected. Waitress, Daniel said quietly. That's what she became after she refused every interview, every public recognition, every foundation offer. Alina closed her eyes briefly, as if wishing the moment would disappear. Victor stared at the document, his expression slowly changing. You're telling me, he began. Daniel nodded. Yes, the woman you've been humiliating is the same person who saved 12 children from a burning building while others ran away. The restaurant was completely silent now. Even the clinking of plates had stopped. Victor's arrogance finally cracked, replaced by disbelief. That can't be true. But Daniel's voice remained steady. It is. Alina finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because they were scared. A pause. Then she continued softly, but I didn't want to be seen as someone special. I just wanted a normal life after that. Daniel nodded, understanding more than anyone else in the room. Victor looked around, realizing for the first time that the people who had quietly watched him humiliate her were now looking at him differently. Not impressed, not silent, but disappointed. And for someone like him, that was worse than anger. Daniel turned slightly toward him. Now tell me, he said calmly, who exactly deserves to be spoken to like they're nothing? Victor didn't answer. For once, he had no words. The weight of the truth had stripped away every layer of arrogance he wore like armor. Security stepped back. The tension faded slowly, replaced by something more powerful, reflection. Alina's hands shook slightly, but Daniel gently spoke to her again. You don't have to hide anymore, he said. Not from who you are. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. I just wanted peace, she whispered. Daniel nodded. You deserve that, but not at the cost of being treated like you don't matter. Something in those words broke through the walls she had built for years. Victor slowly sat back down, silent now. The power he thought he held had evaporated in minutes. And in that quiet space, something changed in the room. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Respect returned. Not because it was demanded, but because truth had finally spoken louder than ego. As the evening light softened through the glass windows, Daniel picked up his jacket. I think this is over, he said calmly. Alina looked at him, her voice barely audible. Why did you help me? Daniel paused for a moment, then replied simply, because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it either. He gave a small nod and walked toward the exit. But before he left, he added one final line without turning back. Don't let the world make you small just because it doesn't know how to handle your strength. The door closed gently behind him. And in that moment, Alina stood not as a waitress hiding from her past, but as someone finally beginning to understand her own worth again. Victor remained silent, the restaurant slowly returning to its quiet rhythm, but nothing was the same anymore. Because some moments don't just change a night, they change people. And sometimes the quietest people in the room carry the loudest truths. Final message: true strength is not in power, wealth, or status. It is in respect, humility, and the courage to stand up for others when it matters most. And sometimes the people the world overlooks are the very ones who once saved it in silence.